Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham and Ray Petree are here. We're going to talk some AEW and New Japan Wrestling, and we got a lot to get into with yet another pay-per-view. Man, I had some fun technical issues getting into that pay-per-view last Saturday night. I finally finished it last night. I had to renew my NJPW app, which took a while. I got to watch some of the show live. Then I had to change. I had a Fire Stick issue because I guess NJPW the app doesn't support the Fire Stick anymore. So I had to go back over to Roku, which was great because that app didn't used to be on Roku. Now it is. I was so pleased last night. I love this app. I'm just going off here right now, Ray, because the one thing I love about that app is you can watch individual matches. I think everybody should do this.
Yes.
And so anyway, so I was joyed to get back into that. Um, that was a solid show Saturday night. I love their presentation, the way New Japan shoots its matches, the different camera angles, everything, the way they treat it like it's an actual sporting event and not a TV show. Everything about that, and then the matches were pretty good too. What were your first impressions?
Neither of us are strangers to New Japan's production, particularly in the Tokyo Dome, which is where they shine. But let's pretend like we are. And as an AEW viewer, um, I loved how this was produced. I loved the big fight feel it had, not just in a wrestling sense, but in a combat sports way. I love the way the Titantron is, the ramp going down to the arena. Unfortunately, I think the house was 16,000, which is small for the Tokyo Dome, and it definitely looked like it at times. But they shot it in a way that it looked full. It looked like a great crowd, and I not to pat myself on the back, but I think this was the best review I've ever written, and I think a lot of that has to do with the way New Japan tells stories in the simplest way to highlight the strengths of the wrestlers. Um, I love the show a lot, and I quite frankly don't watch New Japan as much as I did 6 years ago. I'm not as familiar with the product, and yet I loved it. I really enjoyed this a lot, especially the two main events. But there was a lot of good things here.
Yeah, I'm like you. The New Japan, being a fan of New Japan 6 years ago, even before 6 years ago, was why I became a fan of AEW. So many of the talents, of course, started or made their names in New Japan, and whether they started there or not. And then yeah, I've kind of gotten away from the product, except for through the lens of AEW in the last few years. But yeah, that's why it felt kind of like a homecoming for me, just to take in a show live, and then watching the last couple matches on the app, the way that app breaks things down so brilliantly. And yeah, the camera angles I was talking about. I mean, just like shooting up at the wrestlers, and you can see the lighting of the Tokyo Dome in a different way than you see on American shows, where they kind of shoot down or just straight out at the matches from the different angles. In the big fight feel, yeah, this felt like, I don't watch a lot of UFC. I haven't for years, but I was a boxing fan growing up, and this felt like the presentation felt like big fight, heavyweight title fight kind of approach. It's not sports entertainment. It's in between matches, you don't get a lot of the glitzy packages that you see on pro wrestling. You get people talking about the next fight coming up, and it's presented as that. And even my wife watched some of it with me, and she never really watched New Japan before, but she watches some AEW with me to humor me, I guess. And she was noting, like, at one point during the Kenny Omega match, the ring boys came out and put an ice pack on his knee or his hip, I think it was, when he did one of his over the ropes moves. And she's saying, "Well, why are they doing that?" Well, that's because they treat this as a real fight, And after the matches are over, they come out and put those ice bags on their shoulders and head and things like that. This is presented as I mean, it's presented in a real way that American fans aren't used to, WWE or AEW fans aren't used to.
Um, just the sparing use of chairs and tables in this show when they brought them out in that match, which I don't really want to jump the gun because I think, that match deserves its own attention, but it made it feel special, it made it feel unique, it made it feel extreme in a way that, when you do things multiple times in the same show or in the same month, now things start to seem a little diluted. There's such an attention in New Japan to the sport of professional wrestling that we don't get in American wrestling. And a lot of that can be credited to Gato and Hiroshi Tanahashi, who are in charge of New Japan right now. And while the talent they have is not anywhere close to as good as it was even 4 years ago, let alone 6, 7, or 8 years ago, um, they're still making magic happen. And I really love this a lot. And to your point, Tokyo Dome, this is where Mike Tyson fought Buster Douglas. This is a great sports venue, one of the great sports venues in the world, and a mecca of professional wrestling. It was cool to see some AEW guys get to shine under the bright lights of the Tokyo Dome.
You know, how long it had been since my wife had watched any New Japan with me, and she watched a few minutes of these shows, of this show. Um, she remarked how the fans were able to cheer. I guess we hadn't watched since during the pandemic, and they were able to have lots of fans at their shows, but they had to wear masks and they couldn't cheer. And so that tells me how long it's been for me. We'll just talk about a couple of matches on this show, maybe three. Mercedes Mon it will start with Mercedes Moné, Mina Shirakawa. I think we were on the same page as of a few weeks ago, even that Mercedes Moné, the former Sasha Banks, obviously, had her rollout in AEW had been not done very well, but in the last few weeks. And this match is another example of it. She's starting to hit a stride. And this was a really solid match. I actually watched this one live last Saturday night, and I think it was the last match I was able to watch before I finally conked out. But I really liked this match and both performers. And so yeah, what your thoughts?
Yeah, we've talked about it for months now. That Mercedes Moné, when she debuted, I think Jim Ross said it best. It was just hard to connect with her because it's hard to get a sense of who she's trying to be. And there's still some things. There's still some identity crisis, I think, before she really, um, as a character, can replicate what she did in the WWE. But this belt collector gimmick, where she's now the Rev Pro Undisputed Women's Champion, she has another belt, but it's not really a title. And then, obviously the TBS and the New Japan Strong Women's Championship. Um, there's an air about her, and I think this is why she left WWE. She wanted to represent wrestling in a broader way. As an international star, not just an American star. And Mina Shirakawa, the way, her appearance belies her age. She's almost 40. And her rise to this place that she's found in the last year has really been out of nowhere. She wasn't a star at this magnitude until she began that story with Tony Storm. And she was able to prove herself at the Tokyo Dome, which I'm sure was a big moment for her. Obviously, Mercedes Moné's talked about how big this moment was for her. They both had the air about them that they're stars. They both look great coming out, and both of them worked really well in the ring. I don't know. I don't think they've wrestled together. I don't know if they've ever trained together. I know that they're friends in real life and have been for a while now, but this was a really good match. It flowed well, and it felt like a title for title match. Like the gravity was there that, it meant a lot for these women to walk away with that New Japan Strong or the Rev Pro title.
I'm gonna skip ahead to the Kenny Omega Gabe Kidd match, just because we've been talking a good bit lately and writing a good bit lately about Kenny Omega and his return. Okay, so I'd read your review because I didn't watch this one live Saturday night, Sunday morning, as you know, as that show went on the East Coast. And then I didn't watch it. I didn't get to watch this until last night. So I'd already read your review. Then I watched Dynamite, which we'll talk about here in the podcast as well. And it's had seen Omega's return just in a mic capacity, and then there was a beat down and all that kind of stuff going on to set up some storylines there in AEW. Um, but I'm telling all that so I can kind of say in his promo in AEW on Dynamite, Omega, sort of was making the point. Well, I had diverticulitis. It's something that almost killed me. It was really hard, obviously, coming back from that, and I may not be the same Kenny Omega. I'm gonna probably have to. He didn't use the words water it down, but it sounded like he was trying to talk about I'm gonna have to, you know, pick my spots a little better. And so I'm thinking, as I flipped the match on last night, I'm thinking, well, okay, he talked about he's not gonna be the same Kenny Omega and this, that, and the other. And then I see this match. And it's like he's still, it was like 5, 6 years ago, Kenny Omega. It was like Kenny Omega when he was wrestling in the Tokyo Dome against Okada, Omega. I mean, this match, so for a guy who says he's not going to be able to do what Kenny Omega did, he did everything Kenny Omega did in his first match back with Gabe Kidd. It was a great testament to, a Kenny Omega match. So, man, hopefully he's not going to hold back in AEW now because he was classy Kenny Omega here.
If there ever was a star-making performance, this was a star-making performance for Gabe Kidd, who he is the New Japan Strong champion at the moment, but on the hierarchy of New Japan titles, I don't know how high that is.
Yeah.
Maybe for American audiences, it's valuable, but Gabe Kidd is still finding his footing. He's not the leader of his own faction. He's a part of David Finlay's War Dogs. Um, these guys told a fantastic story leading up to this match, and the commentary did a lot of justice, which we'll talk about in a minute, I guess. But Kenny Omega really is a generational performer. Um, you could make an argument over the last 10 years, he's been the best wrestler in the world. I think a very strong argument. And I was at the show in West Virginia in 2022 when he returned after his absence, and he wore that black shirt. And I'll just say this, he did not look this good then when he returned in 2022 as he does now. He looked fantastic. This match, was pretty long and methodical until about halfway in, and then they really blew the roof off and went to the walls. And but man, I mean, I gave it a 4.5 stars, which is I think the highest rating I've given a match thus far, actively reviewing them. And it was well warranted. At the end of the match, Tanahashi was overcome with emotion, crying at Gabe Kidd's fighting spirit and the way he defended New Japan. This was an early match of the year candidate, if there ever were one.
What I like about this is this match and then the Zack Sabre Jr. Ricochet match reminds me of what I like about Gato's booking. Let's just say his not just because, and I shouldn't say booking necessarily because booking is putting the matches together and telling the stories. The production that goes into these matches, good New Japan matches, main event level matches. They do. It's when you said it started out slower and then built up. They do that. The first 10 minutes or so, this is how wrestling was done in 50 years ago. And I know the Jim Cornettes of the world don't like to hear that it's done this well, but it starts out as a wrestling match. It starts out as two guys feeling each other out. They trade advantages. A guy will control for a couple minutes, the other guy will hit a move and control for a few minutes, and then you get maybe the first 15 minutes of the match of a good 30-minute main event level match in New Japan will start out that way, where it's a contest, and there's one guy leads, one other guy leads, and then you get to the spots where you sort of get the series of near falls. We don't it's not it doesn't start out 100 miles an hour in minute one.
Mhm.
Like unfortunately too much of the AEW production does. It's they start out, they go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, and then what's left? Um, and so this match was a great example of that. It was slow, and then it built up to a conclusion, just like any good story does. And so, yeah, I love that. Again, it was a good reminder. I mean, it's been away from the product for a while. It was a good reminder of what Gato and Tanahashi and that group do so well.
Gato's talked before about his affinity for Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express and Jim Crockett Promotions in Mid-South, and how in the 90s wrestling in Japan had become so shoot oriented, and how he loved classic wrestling and how it influenced his booking style over the years. And I mean, it's evident, he just understands storytelling and, like you said, production, and how important it is to build stars as legitimate athletes. And I just, if you're not a New Japan fan, Gabe Kidd trained in the LA dojo after Shibata I guess it was a brain hemorrhage, or he was paralyzed. He became the teacher at the LA dojo and trained the next crop of foreign wrestlers. And Gabe Kidd was one of his students. And he's never graduated from that young boy attitude of, I wear black trunks and I'm still finding my identity. And in this match, he comes out with the New Japan logo on his trunks, demonstrating that he's defending New Japan against Kenny Omega, who betrayed the company. And he used the Inoki special, which Shibata taught him, to try to not only make Kenny Omega submit, but playing in the diverticulitis and how his abdomen is, you know, he had 2 feet of his intestines removed, and so much of this match was just beautiful. I mean, him going into his bag and pulling out those things Shibata taught him, representing New Japan and the fighting spirit that Inoki passed on to Shibata, was beautiful. And I understand why Tanahashi was so emotional over the match, because you're seeing this kid who has not yet really made a name for himself become a star, and now all of a sudden he looks like the next big foreign star in New Japan.
This is where we'll talk about the Chris Charlton commentary, and then Tony Schiavone. I guess we'll talk about that too. Um, I again had not watched this match until last night, so I'd already read about the suspension, and I hope it's storyline. I hope it's not real. Suspension of Chris Charlton for his commentary during this match. He was selling. I should say what he said first. He talked about Tony in the context of Kenny Omega versus Gabe Kidd here, and the honor of New Japan versus AEW, and this was a joint pay-per-view. So just like the Forbidden Door pay-per-views that we've seen the last couple of years, it was company versus company, and so Chris Charlton, it was doing some. They didn't feel like shoot comments, especially when I heard them last night in
Yeah.
the context of what he said. He talked about Tony Khan being a money mark. He criticized the booking of the former New Japan stars now in AEW. Um, let's help him put the story over. And so now we're told again. I hope it's a work and not a shoot. I hope that it's the case that we're told that Charlton has been suspended for 2 months. Um, in the context of all that, Tony Schiavone, who by the way is a native of Augusta County, where I'm based, got his start at a radio station in Stanton, WTON, where I got my start in radio and
Wow.
broadcasting as a result too. Yeah, many years after Tony, obviously, but um, Tony Schiavone posted a tweet, then deleted the tweet where he basically told Chris Charlton to GFY, and something about needing to take a shower. I also hope that that was a work on the part of Tony, but we won't know that for sure. And then Tony wasn't at Dynamite this week. Folks were wondering, was that a result of him being punished somehow for his tweet that he deleted? Dave Meltzer says no, it was just a family issue. Um, I wrote a quick column about this yesterday, and I noted in the column, be careful, taking Dave Meltzer's word for anything necessarily. Dave knows more about wrestling than any of us, and he's forgotten more about than any of us will ever know. But also, yeah, wrestling journalism is wrestling journalism, so it can be a work too. But anyway, all that said, I hope this is all just a big work. that these people don't take themselves that seriously, that Tony Khan needs to tell New Japan, hey, you need to suspend that guy for 2 months because he said mean things about me.
Yeah, I want to commend Walker Stewart and Chris Charlton because the commentary on this show was phenomenal. Um, Very concise. They got to the point. They told stories while they were calling the action in the ring. Um, I, I was really blown away with the commentary, and I'm not just saying that apropos of this. I'm really upset that he was suspended because while I was watching the show, I was just thinking, man, this commentary is terrific. And I haven't watched much New Japan since Walker Stewart became the lead play-by-play guy. I'm more accustomed to Kevin Kelly, and I got to say, Walker Stewart blew Kevin Kelly out of the water. And Chris Charlton is not just a color commentator; he's a transcriber, a translator, and a legitimate New Japan historian. This guy was hired by the company because he knows so much about this company's long history. Um, so to not have him on the booth and ostensibly he's not working at all, is shocking to me if it's true. I hope, like you said, it's a work. I want to throw this out there because I mentioned this in the review, and I think it's pertinent for New Japan fans and people being introduced to New Japan. Is Tanahashi's retirement match. He's the president of the company. I mean, people say he's the Hulk Hogan of Japanese wrestling. He saved New Japan from the brink of death just for his sheer charisma and positivity, um, and the connection he has with the audience. He's retiring at next year's Wrestle Kingdom, and he wants to sell out the Tokyo Dome. Um, and this year was the lowest attended Wrestle Kingdom that I can recall. Maybe ever 21,000 people. This show that usually does in the realm of 25 to 40,000 people. So they had their work cut out for them. I wonder if we're going to get a promotional war here. The Forbidden Door has always been a respectful thing so far. Are we going to get AEW versus New Japan over the course of the next year?
Yeah, it's yeah, was also disappointed in seeing the crowd shots. They had just a few crowd shots. As you and when the bigger like when at the beginning of the show, I think when you first turn on a New Japan pay-per-view, you see a few minutes of just a still camera from way back. And man, this place is empty. What's going on here? This is a big show, and I can understand it. AEW has raided the talent roster. They've taken a lot of the folks away that did sell out the Tokyo Dome or close to it for all those years, and I kind of agree with Chris Charlton in his what I felt like was a worked comment that we haven't done as well here in the States with those guys as New Japan did over in Japan, but in terms of the booking and usage of them and wringing every fan dollar out of them that we should be able to do, but um, yeah, it's tough. You take away that top shelf of talent, and it takes some work. I love Zack Sabre Jr. I've always loved Zack Sabre Jr. and we'll talk about his match coming up here in a couple minutes. But he's the world champion. You got a lot of the guys who are sort of at that top level. Tetsuya Naito has been a favorite of mine for years. They're definitely getting older. I mean, even I looked up Zack Sabre Jr.'s age and didn't realize he's close to 40 as well. I think like 37 or 38 years old. So yeah, it's tough. You got, they had they should have if AEW hadn't come along, 6 years ago, New Japan would have all those guys plus, the Zack Sabre Juniors and Gabe Kids and all these guys of the world right now on one roster. Just imagine, what they would be booking and all the different things back and forth you'd see. And so, because they haven't built up quite yet that next generation to be able to take over. I mean, Takeshita should be over there, competing. If again, if not for AEW's last 6 years. So, uh, yeah, it's a challenging time for them right now. And the goal of selling out Wrestle Kingdom next year, you got a year, but a year is a really short time in terms of building up a talent base. It's going to take longer to do that, and so it's not going to be easy for this company. That said, you're what you had said to prompt this was, can you see a promotional war? I don't know if I'm Tony Khan. I mean, they are. It's a they're both individual companies. I don't know if I'm Tony Khan, if I want to prop them up. He's proven he's likely to want to raid more talent. He's going to want to steal more of their talent. So I don't know that Tony Khan's going to throw a helping hand out there necessarily.
Yeah, you look at the talent that was offered to the show, and obviously Kenny Omega is huge. Now, there are, the rumor and innuendo is that the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, when they signed their contracts and re-signed, they they wanted creative control over their ability to go to New Japan freely. The rumor is that Tony Khan didn't want them there, and he certainly didn't want Kenny Omega's return match to be in New Japan, but they insisted that that was what was going to happen. And you look at the other stars, Mercedes Moné signed to AEW with the expectation she would be able to work back and forth. Other than that, the biggest star they offered was Willow Nightingale, I guess. I mean, Ricochet was in the main event, Brody King, Konosuke Takeshita just signed a contract with New Japan. So he's also now working for both companies. But I mean, it's not like they sent the best over there. They didn't send Jay White. They didn't send Okada. They didn't send Will Ospreay. It's not like they sent all the guys that have traditionally been draws in Japan before. FTR, former IWGP champions, did not participate in the event. Claudio Castagnoli was there in place of Jon Moxley, who I think was initially supposed to face Shota Umino. If I remember correctly, that's the match that was being built up. Shota was going to get back-to-back world championship opportunities. So, I don't know. I hope that's not the case. I would love Forbidden Door to be a true promotional war where it's guys are facing for titles and there's legitimate build to it, because that is going to be in London. I don't know if it's going to be at Wembley, maybe the O2 or something like that, but you know, I don't know. I hope they're able to turn this into a piece of business that does well for both companies, because New Japan just lost their TV contract in America. They're not on Access TV anymore. And you know, I, they need to find a footing in America again, because those New Japan World subscribers, it adds up.
Yeah, yeah. People like us that
Yeah.
yeah, our 999 yen per month that goes to yeah, there was a lot of online discussion that I had picked up on about how it totally almost ignored, if not completely ignored, this show was on AEW programming last week. I mean, I watched the Collision show on Saturday night from 8 to 10 Eastern time. The pre-show for this pay-per-view started at 10 Eastern. I don't remember there maybe was, if there was any mention of this show on that 8 to 10, in that 8 to 10 time slot, it was so insignificant that I don't remember it. So it's weird that, and it was even to a point where, okay, I'm assuming at some point during that, that they're not during that 8 to 10, time frame. Well, I'm just gonna, I'll go and look on my pay-per-view channel on my cable, and well, it's not there. That's weird. In fact, the pay-per-view channel that is on my cable was re-showing World's End. So I'm like, okay, this is odd. I guess I'll go New Japan. That's great. I'll go to the app and get it there. That's fine. Um, but so I had to look that up. It wasn't like AEW told me this was the case, so they weren't trying to help New Japan make any money, in any way, shape, or form. And that was just, it stood out as being so odd
Yeah.
that we had to find it with Kenny Omega making his return, with the Young Bucks having been gone for months from
Yeah.
AEW making their return, so to speak. I mean, yeah, that I don't think that's a good sign for New Japan, that their partners, so to speak, are too helpful to them, because they weren't helpful at all in that respect.
I remember in 2021, Bryan Danielson renegotiating that contract with WWE. Ultimately, obviously went to AEW, but he's admitted it's true that the WWE and Vince McMahon were negotiating with New Japan so he could compete in the G1, because he wanted to wrestle in Japan, in New Japan, and they were going to make it happen. And he signed with AEW, and in New Japan, you were interested in working with AEW, probably because they stole a lot of their talent when they began. And But anyways, I just wonder, once this partnership, I don't know how long it is if they've signed anything um in that respect, but I have a feeling Triple H would be willing to do business if it meant a WWE Tokyo Dome show, if it meant Shinsuke Nakamura getting to go over there. I'm sure it could be synergetic. They're working with Noah right now, but Noah also works with New Japan. So it's not like they're working with a competitor in that respect. I don't want to see this just benefit AEW because right now that's all they're just stealing talent, giving guys a blueprint that you can come here and make great money and not work as much. And I don't know, but
Yeah, I would fear the same if I worked with WWE though. So
yeah, sure,
these are
sure.
these American companies are they're American. They we take we don't give a lot.
Yeah.
That's our national psyche. Uh, so no, so let's get back. We'll talk about now the Zack Sabre Jr. Ricochet match. Clash of Styles kind of match. Certainly, Zack Sabre Jr. A ground technical wrestler, submission specialist. Ricochet, if there's an exact opposite of that, that's what Ricochet is. These kind of matches can be they can be tough. I think these guys brought this one off really well though. Tell us, give us your impressions.
Um, I gave this I gave this a 4.5, which seems like maybe it should have been 4.25. But anyways, uh, needless to say, I really enjoyed this match a lot. I don't think it got as much. I don't think it was as appreciated as the Kenny Omega Gabe Kidd match, which understandable. To follow that is difficult. But Zack Sabre Jr. easily one of my five favorite wrestlers, active working today. I love I love his promo. I love his demeanor, and I love how he wrestles. And like you said, this was a clash of styles, but these guys pulled it off. Ricochet brought the fight to him, tried to keep things loose and frenetic, and slowly Zack Sabre Jr. smothered him. He's able to constrict people in ways that it's just absurd how good he is on the mat. And ultimately, Ricochet fell to him. Couldn't escape, his grappling ability. And I think they told a great story throughout the course of this match. I it's a little off. Ricochet obviously challenged him 2 months ago or so at Power Struggle, and at that time he was still a babyface. And I don't know if they were anticipating him turning heel at that point. Maybe they were. I don't know, but in that respect, if you're watching AEW and you're just going to see this match, it was a little odd, a little jarring, considering what he just did to Swerve Strickland. But it was great nonetheless, and it was nice to see Ricochet back in the Tokyo Dome wrestling with New Japan.
Zack Sabre Jr. is maybe my am I thinking this through? Maybe my favorite wrestler right now. I wouldn't want every wrestler to wrestle his style.
Yeah,
He's the kind of guy that, but I think he's the kind of guy the kind of guy, the exact guy or the kind of guy that every company needs.
yeah.
A legit, he comes across as a legit shooter. I don't know if he is in real life, but he feels like a shooter. He's a guy that, boy, of course, he doesn't look the part because he's tall and skinny, but man, he knows. It seems like he knows so many submission moves. He's got moves off of moves. Um, and his matches are so unique. That's why I say that you wouldn't want everybody on the card to wrestle his style because it's because he's unique that you know when you flip on a Zack Sabre Jr. match, you're going to see something you haven't seen, either on that show or for a while. You're going to see guys because the way he works his matches, the other guys end up having to trade the moves with him, obviously, to work his style. And so you see submissions, you see counters, you see a lot of that stuff. And right now, too much of American wrestling just feels like in both companies, but certainly the AEW that we keep up with more regularly, it's high paced. It's let's get as much in 5 or 10 minutes as we can. A lot of high flying. Everybody dives through ropes, over ropes, um, and without a lot of storytelling. His matches, they're storytelling to the nth degree because it's all about can you escape his inevitable? Can you escape what he's going to do? And he won this match with a submission hold. And you don't see a lot of legit submission holds. His matches too, to me, don't feel like, oh, we're waiting for him to hit his finisher. You're waiting to see what he does this time to finish off a guy. And so, selfishly, so I just had this long diatribe where I said AEW is stealing all of New Japan's talent and be wary of WWE. They'll steal the talent too. This is a guy I would love to see on American TV every week because he is the guy who represents that style.
He wears his influences on his sleeve better than I think any wrestler. I mean, he's from the British independent scene. He has that edge. And a lot of people in the British independent scene are from other countries in Europe, and they don't rely on one singular finish. I think of Timothy Thatcher or Gunter. So you have to have that versatility. And then you think, he has the Japanese grappling down, the jujitsu influence and the judo infusion. And then there's the William Regal, the Wigan style of wrestling where he's on he has that edge. He's tough. And then, he worked for Minoru Suzuki. He was a member of Suzuki Gun, and he has that ability to absorb punishment. And he wants to prove he's a bigger man than you and a better man and a tougher man. And everything, it coalesces in this beautiful style, given also his natural gifts and his natural inclinations as a technical wrestler. I remember last year I mentioned this in the reviews, probably not as much as I should have, but when Forbidden Door season came around, he should have been on AEW television 5 weeks in advance, week after week, building a program with someone else who can talk because he's also a great promo guy. Underrated because he's in Japan and he does speak a little Japanese because he's a citizen and he does speak English. But, when he was on Ring of Honor and AEW, like the promos were fantastic. And you could have had him do a program with MJF and it would have been beautiful. Would have been fantastic. He could have a feud with Will Ospreay or Jay White. He could come over here and just the promos leading up to the match would be great. But like you said, selfishly, I'd like him to be in America, but I'm glad he's stayed in Japan and willing to put in the work and carry the company on his back right now. Because he's a great world champion.
All right, I'm realizing we have pontificated so much. We're kind of I'm keeping you later here. Let's get to the AEW Dynamite show for this week. A lot of crossover. It feels like because obviously so many of the stars in AEW now were former New Japan guys. Um, Now let's get to the start of the show. Will Ospreay, Buddy Matthews. Now, um, the first thing I think now when I watch an AEW show, Ray, this is your influence. Do they start with a cold open or do they start with a match? So they started with a match. They came out with a match, but they gave us Will Ospreay and Buddy Matthews. So um, if we're not going to start the way you should start, at least we start with a good match.
Yeah, was there something that preempted the match? Did they run down the? I feel like they ran down the card before the match began, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Maybe they did a quick thing, but
Quick thing. Yeah, it definitely wasn't a promo. Like,
it
yeah,
wasn't a promo or anything to sell us on the show. If they did, it was so quick I don't remember it. So maybe I turned it on a minute or two too late. But yeah, it's so. But yeah, and I like the way you started your review with this. I never something to the effect of I never knew I needed Will Ospreay
yeah.
versus Buddy Matthews. Um, yeah, I'm with you. It's when our Buddy Matthews music comes on, I'm like, yeah, okay, what's this going to be? And we got a pretty good match out of these guys.
I think back to his match against Andrade. I think on the first episode of Collision, was if they had just kept pushing him, I would consider that a star-making performance. But Buddy Matthews, I never liked his work in the WWE, at least on Raw, because he was Seth Rollins' lackey and he looked like a jobber. But in terms of the physical appearance, the guy is shredded. He's jacked. I mean, he's one of the few cruiserweight style wrestlers that looks like a heavyweight. Um, and when this match was announced, either last week or maybe this weekend, I just knew like, oh, this is going to be great because their styles perfectly coalesced. Um, Osprey coming back 10 days removed from that double match performance at World's End and just started off the year with a banger. Just was like, I'm just gonna give you a great match on the my first Dynamite back of the new year. Um, but I mean, at the end of this match, we're back to that Malachi Black rumor mill. Is he gonna leave? Is he staying? Does he want to be at AEW? It's unfortunate that kind of dominated the conversation of this match, but just the action in the ring was fantastic.
I'm gonna skip ahead of the Casino Gauntlet match. This was one that, okay, watching this one live with a friend who is an AEW fan, seeing the entrants coming in one by one, eventually getting to Will Hobbs, Powerhouse Hobbs. Our consensus was, come on, they're not going to do it, but it would be great if Powerhouse Hobbs would win this thing. And then when Hobbs won and gets the shot at the world champion, I got a text from another friend who is usually a pretty harsh critic of AEW's booking and said, "Wow, they put Hobbs over. This is great." Um, I don't know in the end if and obviously I don't have no feeling that Will Hobbs is going to win the world title, and I'm not sure either that it's going to be great that he gets this shot because it always feels like they do this kind of thing, give a guy a shot, have a match, and oh, the winner gets a title shot, and then the match itself just ends up fizzling. But that said, it could be worse for Powerhouse Hobbs. He could not even get a title shot. So
Yeah.
at least at least they're thinking, hey, we need to do something with this guy because he's too good not to. But I like the way they did this. They put all the characters in who, except for MJF, who've been expressing interest in the world title picture of late, and then Hobbs gets to come out on top. So that's a nice push.
Yeah, he was hurt wrestling John Moxley last year for the IWGP World Championship, so there's some symmetry there, and I hope on Collision he gets to talk about that, maybe explain himself a little bit more. But yeah, I'm a little upset. He lost at World's End to Konosuke Takeshita, and in a vacuum, that's not a big deal because Takeshita is a really great wrestler. But I kind of wish that match ended in a tie now because now okay, he gets another title shot this time for the world title, but he's going to lose. So now he's lost two title matches back to back. That I don't that doesn't look great for him, but I'm happy to see him get that shot like you said. And this was a good way to throw all the people in the mix into the fire and see who came out on top. Um, Adam Cole, man, he had two of his stablemates and he still couldn't win this thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But anyways, it was good. And Wheeler Yuta came off as a great heel. Great work for him. And I like that face off with Garcia. I think that could lead to something there if they choose to do that. But
Yeah, if they can do the Hobbs ending with the Hobbs Moxley ending next week, in a way, and this is the way it would go, according to recent booking, where the Death Riders run in, and Yuta probably ends up being the guy that because he's the guy who does all the dirty work. A schmoz finish where Hobbs loses but doesn't lose, one on one straight up. If they do a one on one straight up loss, it just doesn't make any sense, and so. I am a cynic, and I'll assume they'll do a one-on-one straight up loss because
yeah,
I just assume they're going to continue to do their best to screw up Will Hobbs. But um, I'm now going to jump ahead to the women are going to have a gauntlet match coming up. In fact, it's next week. We had Chris Statlander, Willow Nightingale, Tony Storm, and to determine who is going to be able to enter first in this gauntlet. And so, with all the push that we've been seeing for Tony Storm, I think fans were probably leaning towards, all right, they'll make sure she wins this. And I always say I like it when expectations aren't met and you get something different in a match. She doesn't get the win, so good there. She's still the upstart. She's
yeah.
the rookie in her own mind. But no, this was well done. Another good showing for the women's division here.
Yeah, I this was a good match and I'm excited to see a women's casino gauntlet match. I don't know if I don't know if it was Tony Khan's idea, but I'll just go out and say this is probably the best idea Tony Khan's ever had, this casino gauntlet match format. I love it. I think it's the best parts of sports entertainment in regular wrestling, but I posed this question last week and I'm going to stay on this if they continue doing it. How is it advantageous to have the first spot in the Casino Gauntlet match when the second spot's equally as advantageous and no one who's ever started has ever won it, I don't think.
That's a
So,
good point. Yeah, yeah.
so I don't, how's that coveted? I mean, I guess you're in it, you're guaranteed a spot, but so are 20 other people. I mean,
Theoretically, you can win the gauntlet before all the people get in the ring, but we
sure.
know,
Yeah.
realistically,
Yeah.
we
I mean,
know
come
they're
on.
not going to do that.
Yeah.
They're going to show, they're going to have an early pinfall and then show backstage there were like 10 people in line who didn't get in the match. I mean, if you ever did that, then you would sell future gauntlet number one spots as being important. But yeah, it's not like, we know in the Royal Rumble, for example, I mean, being one and two is the worst
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
going to go 60 minutes before you get to a winner. No, I'm with you. I mean, yeah, it's that would be the explanation from a technical standpoint. You can win the match before everybody gets in, but we know,
Yeah.
that's not how wrestling works. So yeah.
Yeah. I think it would make more sense if you're like, well, we have 20 people who've already declared one more spot, two people won it. Now you have an elimination match. Maybe that would make more sense. But anyways, I still expect Tony Storm to win the Casino Gauntlet because once again, this is for Grand Slam Australia, and she grew up in Australia. So for her not to win this and go into that pay-per-view I would be shocked. I tell you what, if she doesn't win next week, I will genuinely be shocked.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's where it's got to go. And so that's now they could shock us and then put some stipulation in later where the winner faces rookie Tony Storm for the shot. I mean, that'd be the only thing they could do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we know what's going to happen in that match next week. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk. We'll finish up here with another Kenny Omega. I've already referenced that he had a in-ring promo. There was some back and forth. I didn't give any specifics there, except for that he said he wasn't going to be the same Kenny Omega, even though he's already been the same Kenny Omega in his return in the New Japan match with Gabe Kidd. Um, but so we did get one thing here. It's clear that Omega is being brought back as a face and an alliance with Will Ospreay, however long term that's going to be. I honestly expected when the predictable beatdown started in the ring with Omega that the Young Bucks were going to be the ones to come out and save him. So I like that we got a swerve. It felt like a swerve to me there with Ospreay being the guy. Um, we've been saying, Ray, for the last few weeks, anticipating that the money match here it needs to be Omega versus Okada. They need to somehow save that for what is it, June or July in Texas?
July, yeah.
Yeah, July in Texas for the big show in the baseball stadium. Um, how do we milk all this to get 6 months of content? Maybe this is the first inkling of what they're going to do. They're going to the slow build starts with Omega and Ospreay being a team for at least a little bit of time.
You know, they clearly have brought Kenny Omega back and positioned him as the executive vice president as a babyface. So in my mind, immediately I go to, well, shouldn't he go handle the Death Riders? Because they just try to kill someone on TV. And and it seems like that's kind of your job to go handle. And you can wrestle. So, not only can you make a decision, but you can go whoop his ass. Um, But okay, so he's going to feud with the Don Callis family with the assistance of Will Ospreay. Um, I'm a Dragon Ball Z fan, which is an anime cartoon, and after the show, Will Ospreay tweeted a picture of the two main characters who are rivals and contemporaries and best friends, as if it's him and Kenny Omega. And I have to ask myself, aren't you kind of the little brother? Because you got your ass beat by him twice and had to cheat to win the second time. Um, so. I don't know. I mean, they seem reluctant. Kenny Omega did not seem like he wanted Ospreay to come out and save him. I'm interested to see where this goes, but I really hope by Revolution Omega has that title at the end of Revolution. I hope he wins the AEW World Championship. I don't have any interest in him challenging Takeshita for the international title. Um, that can happen down the road. They can have that rematch from All Out 2023, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. Seeing him get beaten up by Lance Archer and Brian Cage in his return. You know, I don't know, but I'm interested to see where this can go because Osprey is while he's been the top babyface for the last year, he's also kind of like Kenny Omega's successor. And Kenny Omega's obviously back, so what does that mean? Like, is it at some point are they going to pass the torch or, you know, is this a reluctant team and they're going to feud down the road? I don't know, but
Yep, tag teams usually are makeshift tag teams are formed so that they can eventually break apart and feud. So we'll hey, there's a part three wouldn't be so bad as far as that goes
yeah,
between those two. Quick look at the rest of this. The programming for this week, Collision is Adam Copeland, Big Bill, Dax Harwood, Chris Jericho, Harley Cameron, Mariah May. I mean, Cameron. Well, she's a good jobber, but she's a jobber. So I mean, that's Collision is kind of a weak show this week. Maybe they're doing that knowing that there's NFL playoffs going up against them, Ravens and Steelers playoffs going against them. So the show for next week, we know the matches you mentioned: Kenny Omega, Brian Cage. We got Christian Cage and Hook. I guess that's finally we get Christian Cage and Hook. And
yeah,
then we've talked about the Moxley Powerhouse Hobbs match, and I don't think I mentioned that that show is coming from Cincinnati, so Moxley's hometown. Um, Even more odds stacked there against Hobbs as far as that
yeah,
goes. Because AEW does not follow that Vince McMahon tradition of embarrassing stars in their hometowns. So they go the other direction. So, um, so anything else, Ray, that we've talked almost for an hour now. There was so much to go into. We knew that going in. Anything I've forgotten or anything you want to throw in as we're wrapping up here?
If I may, I host a professional wrestling podcast of my own called Petree's Pit. It's a variety show. We talk about New Japan, AEW, WWE. This week, Raw and Netflix debuted, and you had The Rock, and you had John Cena, and Hulk Hogan, and The Undertaker. And on Dynamite this week, you had Adam Copeland and Jeff Jarrett had a promo, a nice promo exchange with MJF. And what year are we in right now? What is going on in wrestling? 50 plus year old guys coming out, dominating TV time. Jeff Jarrett wants a title shot. You know, The Rock wants a title shot. Hulk Hogan wants to sell some beer on TV. It's a wild week in wrestling, but this was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed Wrestle Kingdom and this week's Dynamite. Hope Dynamite can continue that trend next week on for maximum carnage. But
Well, we'll hope that's the case. We'll also, hey, we gotta promo your got to promo your other podcast here too. So send me some information on that. Ray, as always, thanks for your time. For the people listening, for the people watching, also thanks for your time, and we'll pull this off again next week. Until then, everybody have a great week.
I look forward to it. Thank you.